everyone, for a new episode of the Illusion of Consensus podcast with myself, Rav Arora, independent journalist based in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm delighted here to have today again Dr. Nerina Ramlakhan from the UK, who is an expert sleep physiologist and someone who's been helping people sleep and lower their anxiety and regulate their nervous systems for a few decades now. Is that right? A few decades now? You've been at this for a while?
It is, Ralph. It is. Please don't make me give my age away, but it's a real pleasure to be It's a pleasure to be back with you. Thank you for asking me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. We had a previous conversation, and now we've revamped the show. This is a new season, and honestly, our ideas align so much. Obviously, the theme of holistic health and providing people the tools and the knowledge and the resources to take more and more ownership of their health, rather than relying on sort of mainstream medical advice, which is often just non-existent. Like if I go to my family doctor and say I'm struggling with a whole host of things, which we'll talk about, but I've struggled with anxiety and indigestion and vivid dreams. I mean, all that translates to sleep, but inability to relax, anxiety, depression, etc. And you're just going to be given sleep tablets or anti-anxiety medications, some of which we'll talk a bit about in the podcast. But it's definitely I feel like the sort of mainstream medical practitioner advice on this is very, very flawed, and I'm sure you would agree with that. At least agree. I suppose you could say it's not even in the training for a lot of physicians that they're not given the tools for how to regulate nervous system. That's not part of their toolkit.
I mean, it was only, and again, I'm kind of like, I probably will really be giving my age away today, but, I had a brief stint in medical school before I dropped out. It just wasn't the place for me. Actually, truth be told, I just couldn't pass those exams. They just didn't interest me. There was a lot of learning by rote. There was no kind of why. I didn't feel as if we were asked to question why. What is the mechanism? What is the mechanism? And even though I have a doctorate in physiology and I've studied that for my PhD, I think a lot of my lot of what I know about sleep comes from my lived experience and my experience of working with thousands of people over the years and continually asking the question, why? Why the vivid dreams? Why the restlessness at night? But, the average medical student would have probably had in their first or second year an hour or two's lecture on sleep. And then they qualify years later and they're, let loose on the world. And the problem lies in the training. The fundamental problem lies in the training. And I have done a lot of training with medical doctors, general practitioners, and they would typically come along to my sessions, but often they would come along because their practices would send them along for their continuing professional development, and they'd come for the wine, which I didn't provide, but that might have been provided by the host, and they would kind of like doze off during the session. I had to work really hard to keep them awake because they themselves were so tired, So sleep wasn't really their expertise.
Right. Before we go on, a couple things. First, so you've written the book Fast Asleep, Wide Awake, which I highly recommend. This was a fantastic read. The end of the book, actually, I haven't. I went back into it and I read a bit of it. There were I think a few things I wanted to apply first, and then because the book has a bit of this chronological order of things you can do first, things you should do right away, things you can do later. And you have a lot of practical steps and tools in here, which I highly recommend people check out. It's a wonderful book, so I just want to say that.
Thank you, Rav. Thank you. Yeah, this was a labor of love. So I've written 4 books. This was my second book. And I think each book that I wrote brought me closer to being able to talk about safety, because I've always known my first book, Tired But Wired, was written in 2010. And back then I was saying to the publishers, we need to talk more about the nervous system and inner safety. They were like, no one's really going to get that. And it was only during COVID, just as we went into the first lockdown, that a publisher actually commissioned this book where I was going to talk about safety and the nervous system and how trauma impacts on our relationship with sleep, the interplay between regulation of the nervous system and safety and sleep. But it's been a few years before the world has been ready for that, I would say, even though safety science has been around since the 90s, but it wasn't mainstream.
Right. Now, can you just spend a quick minute here giving people a bit of a sense of what you're doing right now and what your practice looks like?
Yeah. So I have just come through a busy month of May of corporate presentations. And I was speaking, for example, at a conference for head teachers and governors of schools. And this is a particular area of interest for me. There was 650 people, I think, there on May the 16th. So people who are in positions of influence, they can influence students, the education system. And I was talking to them about surviving and thriving. And I was talking to them about the fact that there's this sentence shot out during my mouth during my keynote. And I was talking about lending your nervous system to your students. How parents lend their nervous system to their children, to the baby. This is a neuroscience, the science of safety of the nervous system and regulation and co-regulation and dysregulation. So
Right.
I was talking to these teachers and heads of teachers about how they need to exude whatever they want to create in the environment that they're going into. So it's the typical, it's the Gandhian philosophy of you have to become the change that you want to see in the world. You have to exude it, So I was doing that. I talked last week at a company where there were thousands again on that platform. And I was talking predominantly on the subject of sleep. I've also spoken at a festival talking about the importance of rest. That was a great deal of fun. So I've done a TED talk called Come to Work and Rest, where I talk about the power of intermittent recovery as you go through your talk. Yeah. So I was talking about the power of rest because rest is very relevant for sleep. And we can talk about that, by the way. But, the sleep industry, Rav, is globally worth billions of dollars, billions of pounds. There's so much emphasis on what happens when you put your head on the pillow at night. We have so many products and mattresses and pillows and blackout blinds. And you've probably got a load of those products, and I have, and I'm wearing one right now, But we need to also look at what we're doing in our waking hours, because your ability to rest during the day will impact on your ability to sleep. So this is kind of where my work is going, but I'm putting a lot more emphasis in my keynotes on safety and the regulation of the nervous system. And particularly when you go into organizations and leaders of organizations, heads of governments, they need to be carrying the energy of safety within themselves to exude that in their worlds. That will have a tipping point on their philosophy, on the productivity of the organization. Does this make sense to you? Is that relatable? Does it make sense?
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting. You're talking about co-regulation and how parents, they're essentially giving their nervous system to their kids, based on their own regulation. That's really interesting to think about, especially like for me personally, but also for other people, because some of the same issues that I've dealt with when it comes to anxiety and depression and chronic pain have been there with family members and certain people around me as well.
Interesting. And so this takes us into the whole arena of not just sleep, but also looking at trauma work and the work of people like Gabor Mate and Bessel van der Kerk and Peter Levine, Stephen Porges. I, like you, there has been a lot of genetic, well, you could say genetic, but family influence. This is not to blame and shame our parents. I believe my parents did their best, but I come from a long line of ancestral trauma. Now, there is a branch of science called epigenetics. This is the field of science that goes beyond genetics. It's what's transmitted through generations. And it has been shown scientifically, that, trauma is transmitted through generations. And unless it's healed, it continues to work through generations. So I come from Indian lineage, but my ancestors, my great-grandparents, went to Guyana as indentured laborers or slaves. They lived in poverty. My parents came from poverty. They worked hard. They had this tenacity, but that carries through into the behaviors, into the genes that you inherit. I grew up observing my father as an insomniac, as a type A insomniac who suffered from manic depression, they called it in those days, bipolar disorder. Incredibly tenacious and ambitious. Some of that filtered through to my physiology until I started healing, because I don't want my daughter to have to do this work. So when we start to heal our trauma, then we start to give the cycle a chance of ending,
Right. There's a lot we could talk about on that topic for sure. I think we should focus on a couple of fundamental questions, given that we're doing this for the new season of the show, and obviously a big part of this conversation is sleep, because that's your expertise. I guess we can start with different stages of sleep. I think a lot of people are curious about that. Can you elaborate a little bit on the different stages of sleep, like how we enter into sleep and the different phases that we go through throughout the night?
Yeah. So the journey through the night, as the light levels drop, and we talked about this in our first interview, the light levels dropping, we start to produce this cocktail of hormones and melatonin predominantly, and neuropeptides. So the circadian timer in the brain switches on the sleep cycle. So we go to bed at night, we sleep roughly go through 4 or 5 cycles of sleep. And each sleep consists of a phase of light sleep, less light sleep, deep sleep, deeper sleep. And then you have a phase of REM sleep, or rapid eye movement. So each phase is vital. The light sleep, you might say, let's bypass light sleep and go, we want to go straight to deep. Well, the light sleep is the preparation for your deep sleep, which is why we talk about things like, a lot of sleep therapists and experts talk about sleep hygiene, winding down routines, prepare yourself to go to bed. And one of the things I talk about in my methodology is going to bed earlier, to prepare your nervous system to decompress, so you get into those light sleep stages, which then enables you to surf your way into the deep sleep stages. So we have slow wave sleep or deep sleep. REM sleep is around 10 to 15 minutes. And we have our deepest deep sleep in the initial stages, sleep cycles. And then your longest period of REM sleep will happen just before you wake up. If you're waking up to an alarm or waking up in the morning, you have your longest period of REM sleep. During REM sleep, that's when we typically will be, we have most of our dream process happening then. And because that's the longest phase of REM, and it's the phase where you're more likely, then you're going to wake up fairly soon after that, you're more likely to remember those dreams. And it's such a subjective experience. You can easily think, I spent the whole night dreaming, when actually you didn't. You spent minutes or even seconds, but those dreams were transferred from your subconscious or your unconscious mind into your conscious memories, because you woke up then and you remember that dream. But it can feel subjectively as if you have been dreaming all night, when you might not have been.
Right. Or especially if you've had multiple dream sequences, which is what I usually have. Like you maybe you get up at like 5, and then you have a particular dream, and then you wake up again, finally at 9 or 10, and then you it's like 3 other things in your mind that you dreamt about. So you can have different sequences, right? Which can feel like hours, but you're saying it's usually minutes, like total.
Yeah, it can be minutes. It can be minutes. And, we need our REM sleep, and we do need to dream. And we could talk all day about why we dream. But I often try to reassure my clients that maybe they're not dreaming as much as they think they are. And of course, with the fixation with data and things like measurement, we think, oh my goodness, I had so much REM sleep. I should have been getting this. I should be getting so much deep sleep. And again, I like to, even though I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I've been wearing my Oura ring for 3 years. I'm not on commission to them. I'd love to be, because I do have a lot of time for my Oura ring. But I do encourage my clients to listen to their lived experience. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? how you actually feel. And it's not a case of, I've had so much deep sleep, I've had so much REM sleep, my sleep score is up there in the 80s, early 90s, therefore I'm going to feel fantastic. In fact, I had a day like that yesterday where I aced it on my sleep score. It was 92%. But I actually felt really groggy for a lot. I felt tired. Whereas my sleep score last night, because I had a late meeting online, we didn't finish until 8:45. And then I watched an episode of Dexter with my daughter after that, which is not the ideal wind down routine. But, I didn't sleep that well. My sleep score was 75, which is low for me, but I feel great. And actually, my readiness score was pretty high. It's, despite the sleep, based on heart rate variability, my readiness was good. So it's complex. It's complex. If there's Can I say one thing based on what you've told me about the waking up? When we sleep at night, we go through stages of consciousness. So if I'm fully alert right now, which I am, I'm in a beta wave state. If one of us starts to get sleepy, more than likely you, because I'm doing more talking than you, and you're in the early hour, you're in the early morning, right? So you might start to get a bit groggy and feel like your eyes want to close. You're starting to approach an alpha state. Okay. And then if you start dropping down into almost like beyond meditation, early sleep states, that's theta. And below that is the delta deep sleep stages. So we transition down and we cycle up and down throughout those stages of consciousness throughout the night. Ideally, we don't want to come fully up into beta waves. If you wake up during the night and you get on your phone or you look at the time, you start registering data, you're bringing yourself right back up into full consciousness, into beta waves, which makes it harder to climb back down again. Long-winded way of saying two things. Number one, it is normal to wake up during the night. We would probably be extinct as a species if we didn't have these mini awakenings during the night. Number two, if you don't want to stay awake for hours when you wake up during the night, stop checking the time, stop looking at your watch or your phone. Watch. People don't wear watches anymore. Your phone. Don't look at the time.
Yeah. I was talking to a couple of friends, and that they struggle with that. That's not my particular problem. When if I do get up at night, usually a couple times, it's pretty quickly go back to bed. But I know some people do struggle with that, and that sounds fairly scary to be honest. Getting up at 3 a.m. and not being able to sleep for like an hour, as a friend of mine recently said. Like that sounds like a really hard problem. It's like, what do you do? Like this friend was saying, they were thinking about it and worried and like researching in the middle of the night. What do I do? And just couldn't figure it out.
Oh, no. So it's the second most common sleep problem. The first most common sleep problem is sleep initiation problems, difficulty getting to sleep. The second most common one is difficulty staying asleep. Now, you should tell your friend that Nerina says pretty much everyone will wake at some point between 2 and 4 a.m. That is normal. What is not normal or ideal is to stay awake during that time. And then if you look at my table in Fast Asleep, Wide Awake, where I talk about, Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, then, you learn that waking up between 2 and 4 and staying awake can really have an impact on your mental health if this goes on for too long. So tell your friend not to check the time. Ideally, use his breathing to bring him back to sleep again. Ideally, whatever it is that's really worrying him at night, he needs to deal with that in his waking hours so it's not spilling over into his sleep. He needs to do the work in his waking hours, not in his sleeping hours.
Right. Yeah. Just to reiterate the phases of sleep. So if I have that right, you were saying it's lighter sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, deeper sleep, and then like REM. And then so that's like one cycle. And so we go through that cycle several times throughout the night.
4 or 5 times, depending on how long you're in bed. Yeah. And each one of those blocks of light, deep REM lasts between 90 to 110 minutes.
Interesting. Okay.
90
1.5
to 110
to 2 hours.
Yeah. So our physiology runs roughly on 90 to 110 minute cycles, actually. We have the circadian rhythm, which is the 24-hour clock we expend energy, we recover energy in sleep. But within the circadian rhythm is the shorter rhythm of about, as I said, about an hour and a half. This is called the ultradian rhythm. And that's the kind of the hum of your energy. That's within the 24-hour cycle. And that continues through the night. That cycling of 90 to 110 minutes continues throughout the course of the night. And within each of those, you have those slices of light, deep REM.
Interesting. And any idea as to the ratio of each? It's a very granular question, but do we have any idea within the 90 to 120 minutes? Do we have any idea? Like, is it a couple minutes REM or 30? It varies.
I mean, the REM is around 10 to 15. The REM is around 10 to 15 minutes. But the proportion that REM phase is longer as you make your way through the night. So in the early hours of in the morning where you wake up, that's your longest REM, and your deepest deep is in the first cycle.
Right. And this goes to something we were talking about last time, which is worth rehashing. You were telling me how if you go to bed later, you miss out on the deepest part of sleep, the deepest phase.
Yeah, you can do. You can really, because it's like that. Those earlier phases are really the setup for the deep sleep that nature has designed us to get. As light levels drop, as we become more in tune with nature's rhythms, we're set up to get your deepest deep sleep. And there are some, right at the beginning, and there are some theories that hunter-gatherer survival was based on us getting that good deep sleep when it was really dark. And so we have evolved to kind of wake up in the early hours to go hunter-gathering if we need to go hunter-gathering. So there are some theories that would say we are more, we're built to have biphasic sleep patterns. And there are still some hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa that will get up during the night and go hunting. I mean, obviously in our society, we don't do that. But there are a lot of us in the Western world, first world countries, who are waking up in the early hours, effectively going hunting. They can't sleep, like your friend.
Yeah. And so related to this deepest period of sleep question, so I think you were saying last time that this deepest period of sleep is gotten before midnight. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what time you go to bed, but ideally you would get that before midnight. And this is where
after midnight you don't get it.
Sorry?
So after midnight you don't get so after midnight you don't get this deepest period of sleep?
You do. You will get it, but the quality of it may not be as good as, say, if you'd gone to bed before midnight. And I am generalizing because there are genuinely some people who are more, their physiology is more, it leans more towards an owl than a lark. They go to bed late and wake up late. And some people prefer, like me, to go to bed early and wake up early. But there's a lot of people think these days that they are owls. They think their physiological predisposition is to be more of an owl.
I feel like it's a cop-out, to be honest.
It is a bit of a cop-out because we've got all our devices and we've got box sets and Netflix and what have you. And the addiction to dopamine fix, which also can delay your sleep timing. But, which is why I like to have a holistic approach, because when people say to me, well, why is it important to get that deep sleep before midnight? Well, if you then start bringing in the ancient sciences like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, they'll tell you that the organ systems that are being replenished before midnight are absolutely vital. And it's important to be getting your deep sleep at that time. It's important to get all your deep sleep throughout the night, but it's really important to aim to get to bed before midnight. And I know we debated this a lot in the last call, and I think you wanted some exact scientific research, which I'm not able to supply you with. I would just say that the right brain, the intuitive brain, it intuits before the science catches up, I'd have to say. And those ancient sciences, I think Western science is now gaining, is catching up, if you like. We're now starting to see research emerging that is supporting what those ancient sciences have been telling us for thousands of years.
Yeah. I'm just re-finding this table, which I found absolutely fascinating in your book. This is from traditional Chinese medicine, showing different phases of sleep and the different repairing processes that occur during those phases of sleep. And 9 to 11 p.m. is thyroid and adrenal glands. And it says it rebalances metabolism and energy levels, replenishes energy depleted during the day, reduces stress hormone levels, emotional rebalancing, hopelessness, confusion, paranoia. So can you elaborate on what that exactly means?
Hi, everyone. A quick word from our first and exciting sponsor, Alchemy Elements. Alchemy Elements is a powerful adaptogenic supplement. For those of you who don't know, adaptogens are a class of plant compounds, primarily herbs and mushrooms, which can help build the mind and body's resistance to stress. Alchemy Elements contains a very unique and carefully selected blend of 9 adaptogens, such as lion's mane, cordyceps, polygalaroot, and shilajit, and they can help boost energy, boost your immunity, and increase focus and overall stabilize your mood. It can have a wide array of effects, which can often depend from individual to individual, but it's a great way to start your morning and generally increase your focus and your energy levels. You can just pour 1 scoop of Alchemy Elements into your morning coffee or your protein shake or smoothie, and you're off to the races. It's a great way to start the day. I use it every day. I find that it can generally stabilize my mood levels and increase focus, especially if I want to get a big project done or finish a very important task. Alchemy Elements often is a great way to kind of start and get my focus going and get me primed for whatever task I want to accomplish. We're very excited and very happy to work with Alchemy Elements. We've been working with them for a couple of months, and now in this new iteration of the podcast, we're going to continue our relationship, which is very special to us because Alchemy aligns with our mission and values of individuals taking greater ownership of their personal, mental, and physical health and relying less and less on corrupt and flawed, generalized kind of medical advice. And less reliance on pharmaceutical drugs, and more of a general interest and focus on holistic health. For a limited time, Illusion of Consensus readers and listeners can get 10% off their first order using the code word illusion, or 30% off a subscription monthly order, where you can get a monthly shipment of Alchemy Elements delivered to you. For the subscription orders, you can also get with it a bonus gold kit to store your Alchemy Elements. Overall, I think Alchemy is a fantastic product. I highly recommend you check them out in the link below in this podcast, wherever you're listening, Spotify, Apple, Substack, Rumble, or YouTube. Just go to the link, use the code word illusion, and you can get your discount and you won't regret it.
Yeah. And before I do that, I'm feeling paranoid because I've just realized I haven't got my laptop switched charging. So let me just do this before. Extremely unprofessional of me. There we go. Charged in now.
No,
charged up.
We have a production team now that'll cut this out, so it's all good.
Excellent. So I can swear and I can behave badly, and you'll just cut that out. I mean, you've had Russell on your show, so you
can throw you can throw a tantrum and just say something totally rude and whatever, and just get away with it.
Yeah, but don't cut it out. It's part of my USP actually. when I'm presenting and I'm on stage, something happens and I become this kind of very irreverent, a bit of a stand-up comedian. That is my happy place, to be honest. But anyway.
That's actually mine too. Which doesn't occur in podcast. That doesn't come out in podcasting, but in social settings that can come out. Usually with like my peers, that's when that comes out.
I do it professionally now, Rav. You know, I mean, there's got to be some advantages to getting old. There's got to be some advantages. It's just giving less shits. You know, I giving less. I could say the worst word, but just giving less of them as you get older. So and my audiences love it, actually. They really don't care. They love it. But we're talking about this table.
Yeah,
where
I've
does
thought about yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. So
no, go
to
on,
answer
go
the
on.
question that I asked, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I
No, I
worked for.
was just gonna say something. I was gonna say like, okay, but there's a lag for some reason. I think it's
I
your
know.
Wi-Fi or my Wi-Fi. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, you now answer the question that I asked. Let's pick it up there.
Yes, sir. So I worked for 10 years in a psychiatric unit, one of the top psychiatric units in London, in England, in London. And I spent 10 years working there with people. And I started mapping the symptoms people were reporting and the sleep that they seemed to be missing out on. So I was looking for patterns. And this is where I started to notice that the symptoms that you've just described on that table, so for example, not getting to sleep before midnight, I would see a kind of an increased incidence of frequency of people presenting with thyroid, adrenal exhaustion, chronic fatigue, the problems that I've outlined in that table. And similarly, as you work your way through the table, the sort of sleep phases that people were unable to access, looking at the symptoms they were showing up with. And then I looked at Chinese medicine, the Chinese medicine clock, and I saw that there's a remarkable similarity between the Chinese clock, the organ systems that they were talking about that are replenished or restored during certain phases, and emotional symptoms. So I just added my dimension of sleep to that. I started drawing just joining some dots, and realizing that actually, missing out on sleep isn't just a case of missing out on sleep. It's like, when is it that you're waking up? What time are you going to bed? And therefore, what phases of sleep are you missing? Just kind of joining dots, really. That was my science. That's the science behind that table.
Oh, so the right column in this table that you have. So those are your findings, or the correlations that you found in your practice.
From
Is that
working
right?
from working in the psychiatric clinic. I'm now finding my table as well. I've got the book here as well.
Yeah. So you have deep sleep phase 9 to 11 p.m. and then organ system, thyroid and adrenal glands. That's for people listening and we're watching.
Mm-hmm.
That's the organ system that goes through repair in that time. So that comes from TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. The organ systems that are being repaired.
Yeah. So if you look at the Chinese medicine,
but then the column, yeah. Go ahead.
So the column to the right of that, the rebalancing process, where I talk about the emotions, they come from my observations, but they also come from Chinese medicine as well. Because typically in Chinese medicine, if you go and see a Chinese medicine practitioner, because you've been told by your medical Western doctor that you've got some liver issues going on, you've got gallstone issues going on, you'd go to a Chinese medicine practitioner, they'll look at your tongue, they'll feel the pulse rate, and they'll say, liver, there's something going on with your liver. And typically, liver will be associated with, with anger and rage and frustration, So you look at things like alcoholism and addictions, for example, and that typical, and I did a lot of work with addictions at the Capio Nightingale Clinic. Typically you'll see people who are sedating their emotions of anger and fear and frustration and rage. They're sedating it by drinking too much. And so, of course, they present with liver problems. What does alcohol do? It will wake you up in the early hours. You can't get back to sleep. So scientifically, alcohol has a dual effect. People will drink alcohol. It releases inhibitions. It helps you to relax. And in fact, it can help you to access those initial stages of sleep more easily. But then it will wake you at some point in the early hours between 1 and 3 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep. Alcohol stops you breaking down adrenaline. So your anxiety levels will be higher. You'll be sweating because of the adrenaline, the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. So, and then when I work with the addiction patients, those patients who coming in with their addictions, their liver problems, not sleeping in the early hours as well. You've got the anger issues going on, the rage, the frustration, the fear. So it's joining these, it's looking at these patterns, you know?
Yeah, I've also heard, and I have a question for you about this that I'll ask in a couple minutes. So you talk a lot in the book, or you write a lot in the book about Ayurveda as well, and so you're kind of combining Western science or clinical experience, Ayurveda, which for people who don't know is ancient Indian medicine. Obviously, we just talked about traditional Chinese medicine, which is part of why I just love the book, is that you're kind of just mixing these different pieces together, and there's this beautiful collage-like way, sort of providing these different perspectives and seeing where they align, which I find really beautiful. With Ayurveda, I was going to say, I remember reading that they have their own justification for why you should sleep earlier, around like 9, 10, 10:30. I think it's something to do with, if you sleep later, then you enter into the Pitta range, which is like the high energy, high fire rate. They have their own kind of way of categorizing and organizing the different energy systems. And so sleeping later means entering into this very fiery stage, which can increase restlessness and inability to have restful sleep, etc.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm being very rude here, and I'm actually looking at my third book, the Little Book of Sleep, which is, I love this little book as well. And actually, this one became a bestseller during COVID because so many people weren't sleeping well. And this is just like, if you're really exhausted, but you want some good solid techniques, it's covered in the Little Book of Sleep, you know. But because I wrote this book in 2018, this was published, I went a little bit deeper than Fast Asleep, Wide Awake, and I actually brought Ayurveda into this as well. And I talked about the Pitta, Kapha, Vata energies. And if you look at that stuff, those different Pitta, Kapha, Vata, and you collage it with the ultradian cycle, the 90-minute cycle, and you're quite right, Rav. You know that there's a 90 minutes. You go to bed too late. You go into a Pitta phase. You know, because you've shifted into the next ultradian cycle. So that's often where a lot of people the typical scenario for the evening for a lot of people who have sleep problems is they sit in front of the TV. They're in a kapha phase, watery, heavy, sleep, starting to get more settled and dense. They got the TV on, they're watching a box set, they start falling asleep. They use up all of the sleep, they use up the melatonin, they use up the neuropeptides that would help them sleep. And then they think, oh, fell asleep there in front of the TV. Because you also sleep with your eyes open. They go up to bed and they think, but suddenly I'm wide awake. Boom, they've gone into the Pitta phase. They've transitioned into the next ultradian cycle. Pitta, fiery energy. Wow, I feel wide awake. I'm just going to go check my email. I'm just going to go look at social media. You know, I'm just going to get onto my dating platform, which is going to fire them up. So you've got the blue light hitting them, the fact that their melatonin levels have been a bit depleted because they fell asleep in front of the TV. They've used up some of the sleep drive, plus they're going into Pitta energy. So you can see why then some people would have difficulty then getting to sleep, the most common sleep problem.
That's interesting. I've noticed that in myself. I've experienced that before, where sometimes even just like being really fucking tired at like 5 p.m., 6 p.m., like, oh man, like I'm going to go to bed at 9 p.m. today. I'm so tired. Oh, just can't wait. And then, 8 p.m. rolls around, 9 p.m. and there's some emails, a couple calls, and they go, I really want to watch this show. And now the show is getting me excited, and it's a riveting show. It's fun. It's like 10 p.m., 10:30, and it's, and it's sort of, 11 p.m., which is kind of generally when I've gone to bed in the past. Now I'm changed that more towards 10:30. But it's like, that's very interesting how you can feel very tired and motivated to sleep at one point, and then somehow later it's like you kind of surprise yourself, and it's like, oh, it's 11 p.m. and I was really tired at like 7 p.m. and where'd that go?
Yeah, and it's I really encourage my clients to start becoming more aware of the cycles of their energy, the rhythm of their energy, and noticing that. I know myself really well now. I know that if I wake up around 6:30 in the morning or even slightly earlier, my energy is a lot higher than if I wake up at 8 a.m. If I get an extra sleep phase, I have a sleep hangover, sleep inertia. So my preference is to wake earlier and not get that extra sleep phase, where the deep sleep phase goes on for longer and it's shallower. It takes a longer time to complete. And I have more REM sleep, so I'm almost more tired from all that dreaming. Feels like I've been working more. So that's one thing. I also notice, and for a lot of people as well, there may be a little dip mid-morning where they suddenly think, oh, can't concentrate so well. Let me go get another cup of coffee or something. But actually, if they did something different, maybe exercise or do some mindful breathing or drink some water or just get away from screens. I teach all sorts of practices, from visualization techniques, gratitude practice, or just change it up, get out into nature. You'll probably find that you get another side. Your energy levels will come back up again because you've emptied the working memory in the brain. So the working memory in the brain, in the frontal lobe, opens and closes, it opens, takes information in, and closes on a cycle. But our brains have not quite evolved to the level of incoming data traffic that we're bombarding ourselves with. Our brains are still catching up. So what can happen is that working memory starts to become saturated, starts to shut down, and that feels like sleepiness and tiredness. So what you might be experiencing at 7 p.m. isn't so much a need for sleep as a need to close your eyes, get away from the screen, take a break from the laptop, empty your frontal lobe. So I just walked my dog before this interview. I have to really work on my addiction to my dopamine and checking my phone and social media. I've posted some things today. I want to know if people love me and if they're following me or whatever. I have to consciously say, I'm either not going to take it, I'm not going to take it.
I love how you're so honest
or,
about this. This is how most people feel, but most people don't actually say this. But it's true.
I was addicted as the next person. This is why I have to not have my phone in my bedroom. I have an old-fashioned landline where two people who matter the most to me in my life, my daughter and my mother, they can phone me on the landline if they need to. If my daughter's working late because she works in hospitality, she can call me, but she knows my mobile phone is not beside me at night. She's got the landline, So we need to get better at recognizing the cycles of our energy and getting underneath the layers of this. Is this sleepiness or is this mental tiredness? Is this a physical need for movement that's making me feel tired because I've been sitting for too long? Is this a blood sugar level dip, which means I need to eat, not sleep? Is it dehydration that's making me feel sleepy because the brain gets foggy and fuggy when we're dehydrated? And that might feel like you need to sleep. We have another dip mid-afternoon, and that's a great time to have a power nap, which I often do. I didn't today. I've been too busy.
Yeah.
But a power nap is brilliant.
It's interesting you mentioned. It's interesting you mentioned social media addiction, and something that I've noticed, and a friend pointed this out a little bit, that maybe some of the recent issues that I've had with sleep are maybe more characteristic of addiction rather than what I was thinking, more so being nervous system dysregulation, although it's probably both. But just because, and I've now made a deliberate effort to change that. But previously, what was happening and still happening to a degree is like, going to bed around 11, 10:30 now increasingly. And then around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. getting up and feeling this rush to like check the phone, like just check to see if there are any exciting emails or any people that I emailed to have on my podcast. If they said yes, if they said they'll come on, or oh we're doing Russell Brand in 2 days. Oh my God, so what time are we doing it? And like stuff like that. And then usually being jolted a couple times later, especially later in the night, which sounds like from what you were saying is a bit heavier on the REM side, and that's where it gets to be more of a problem for me. Is so the initial wake up 3 or 4 a.m. and then like another one around 6 a.m. Then another one around 7 a.m. Then another one around 8 a.m. and I'm still tired. It's like 8:30. It's like then I got to like sleep again for a little bit, and that I wonder if that's more characteristic of sort of addiction to checking things and being excited about my work rather than something else. What do you think?
So let's think about this. Let's use Dr. Steve Peter or Professor Stephen Peters' model. The Chimp paradox. Have you heard of the Chimp paradox? His book, fantastic book.
No.
And he talks about the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is like your lower brain. It's your very primitive brain. It's the teenager's brain. It's the chimp that wants that instant gratification. So when you wake between 2 and 4 in the morning, let's look at what Chinese medicine might say. So it's an emotional time, emotional rebalancing, bitterness, resentment. You've got that liver detoxification happening, emotions bubbling up. So the chimp doesn't like, the reptilian brain, the primitive brain doesn't like all these feelings coming up. It wants a banana, right? It's the teenager who wants their fix. They want to know who's looking at them on Bumble or Hinge or whatever it is. They want something to soothe them.
Yeah.
The baby wants it.
Yeah.
It wants his dummy. It wants its dummy. That's the chimp brain. And then you have the higher mind. That's like, here we go again. And trust me, I've done this chimpy crap. I was a psychiatric patient in the same clinic where I worked for 10 years. Years before that, I was sectioned with psychosis and bipolar and all that. I learned to not have my lower mind, my chimp mind running the show. And I now, if I wake up with these feelings, I go, that's interesting. One could call it inner parenting, parenting the inner child. That's interesting. I'm having a worry about X, Y, or Z, and I've learned how to observe it. Now, my practices, my self-care practices have taught me how to spot when that chimp brain kicks in and how to soothe the chimp brain or the inner child. So I've learned all sorts of techniques, and I teach all sorts of techniques. There's a technique called the havening technique, which is taught to soldiers who've gone into battle and they've come out with PTSD and they can't sleep and they're getting these chaotic, horrific dreams and flashbacks. And war psychiatrists developed something called the havening technique, which is based on bilateral stimulation. And a very simple technique I teach my clients is this, to bilaterally stimulate your arms, tapping on the opposite sides. And you might use internally or out loud something like, I am safe. I'm safe in my body. I'm safe to rest. It is safe to let go. And it might feel like it's doing nothing, but actually there's a science behind what you're doing, rebalancing the right and left brain, calming the chimp. These are the kinds of practical techniques that I teach and write about in my books as well.
Right. Yeah, I have so many thoughts on that. At this point now, I reintroduced screen time on my iPhone, which is a feature where you can have someone put in a passcode which limits your phone, so you just can't access certain apps after a certain time. Although it's a great feature. So I got my sister actually to do it again, and I had this for a period, and this just goes to show, like, accessing that higher mind, like knowing what to do, like you can become so quickly entranced and stuck to these social media algorithms and just become a slave to these dopamine hits constantly. And I've used the screen time feature on my iPhone for a long time before. And then I needed it. I needed the passcode one time at the middle of the night for something important, and then my brother gave it to me. And then it's been like 6, 7, 8 months since I've went back to it, just because I've just forgotten. And I just realized the other day, I'm like, okay, that's one easy step I can do. So I got my sister to put in the code. And so after like 10 p.m., Instagram, Twitter, I just can't access it. However, it does give you, if you want to access it in the after hours, or when the day restarts after 12 a.m., if you go on an app like Instagram or Twitter, it gives you an option of either enter the passcode to access it, or you get one free minute. And that one free minute, though, I find is not good either. So now I really have to focus on getting the phone outside of the bedroom, but it's just bringing up all kinds of practical considerations, because to hit a deeper point with what you just said, like the before bed, now I'm doing more yoga nidra, guided meditation stuff, which requires the phone or the laptop. So now I got to work through maybe doing that, and then getting up and then putting the phone downstairs, maybe potentially, or just just accepting the free 1 minute thing, because inevitably when I wake up around 3 or 4 a.m. I'll get that 1 minute, because that excitement that I was talking about is very powerful. When that comes up, like getting up at 4 a.m. and having that excitement of like, oh, so who emailed me? Who messaged me? Did I get a message from this person or that person? And that excitement, that rush is very hard to beat. And I think it'd be hard to develop a technique at that point to resist that rush, when I know I have that 1 minute to check the emails and to check. So it's like 1 minute for 1 minute for each app. So it's like 1 minute Twitter, 1 minute email, and that might seem like nothing, but that's enough. To your point, to really excite you and get you in that sort of a beta activation, and all those thoughts and exciting things coming up. So now I'm sort of having to work that out. And to your point about the higher mind, like this is the higher mind, because I know the lower mind, when it's 2 a.m. and it's just hitting that rush of like, what's happening on Twitter, what's happening on email, did someone message me, or what's the podcast schedule for the next week? That's really hard to beat. So now I'm trying to access that higher mind and be like, what can I do to prevent that addictive pattern from emerging, or at least not being able to do anything about it, right? If the phone is downstairs in the basement, then I'm not going to get up at 4 a.m. to go check the phone. Then it's just, okay, now I don't have to, to check it at that time.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're doing some really good stuff. So I commend you. Well, it's good, because the thing is, you're passionate. You're passionate about the work that you do. So you care about it. And it's interesting that we can be passionate about stuff that matters in the world. But that passion can dysregulate the nervous system if you're overly engaged.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned something really interesting through my wearable device. And I find it more interesting to look at what's happening to me during the course of my day than what's happening at night. I use it more for my daytime, because there are 4 levels it looks at. It looks at stressed, engaged, relaxed, restored. And I would note, I have learned so much about myself as a human being, things I intuitively knew, but I never really had this data that was telling me that I could be in a situation that I absolutely love, but I am so leaned into it that I'm actually stressed. My nervous system is in a state of dysregulation. So where does the work lie? The work lies in relaxing a little bit more as I do this thing that is highly engaging. So even if I'm standing on a stage in front of 1,000 people or on TV or something, can I train my physiology so well that I'm highly regulated? I'm always overly regulated, but still engaged. And then can I build in restoration after that? Can I, and again, I find it I'm still working on restoring myself deeply. I can spend all day in a spa with my daughter or a friend and be in a highly engaged state for that, because I'm just excited about it. And I come away and I'm like, I spent a whole day in an expensive spa and I had 15 minutes of restoration. I spent the rest of the time engaged, So it's a work in progress. And this goes back to my trauma roots. It goes back to my mental health history, where I'm a human being who gets really passionate about stuff. That's how it showed up as bipolar, but I don't consider myself to be bipolar, and I'm not medicated for that, but I get really passionate about stuff. So I need to manage those swings, manage them. So I ritualize meditation, my morning practice, 15 minutes in front of my infrared lamp, I'm meditating. I don't need a phone. I don't need anything to guide me through that. I know yoga nidras that I don't need a phone for. I teach my clients really simple ones. I can teach them in 60 seconds, 2 minutes, how to do a yoga nidra where you won't need your phone, so that you're not, because I can pick this up and my nervous system is in a state of engage because I associate this with dopamine.
Yeah.
I haven't even looked at it. Now I look at it and I can see, oh yeah, right. That's quite exciting. I really want to get off. When I'm finished talking to Rav, as soon as I get off, I'm gonna look at that message.
Yeah.
My level of engagement is going to start tipping into stress. So your vivid dreams, your restlessness will come from constant nervous system over-engagement throughout the course of the day. And the more you can learn to regulate and pendulate between sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic and visit the parasympathetic during the day, the smoother your sleep will be at night.
Particularly, two questions on that. One, do you just suggest and I know we talked a bit before about the podcast, and you welcomed, you suggest that I just ask my personal questions here, which a lot of people struggle with. So this is important and interesting. But do you suggest just keeping the phone out of the bedroom, or do you have any other suggestions for that? And number two, when you say entering the parasympathetic more throughout the day, and we're going to talk about safety for in a couple minutes here, which is very important, because that sort of highlights and explains what we mean by parasympathetic. But is that particularly, which is what I'm doing now, more and more, like right before bed? I'm trying to sort of access that in the last like 45 minutes, half an hour before bed, through yoga nidra and meditation, or do you suggest through sort of earlier in the day or various parts of the day?
The latter, throughout the course of the day. Roughly on that ultradian cycle. Every 90 minutes, engage your parasympathetic. If you're a fully engaged, highly passionate, polymath, a crazy person, fully leaned in to life kind of person like you are, and like I am, the more we engage that parasympathetic during the day, the better our sleep will be. Because it's like saying to, Usain Bolt when he was competing, when you get to the Olympics and you get to that start line, 1 hour before you get on the start line, that's when you want to start practicing that high knees and coming off your forefoot. And you want to. So for sleep, yeah, it's nice to do this stuff. It's nice to do the warm up, the wind down, the whatever before you get into bed. But you want to be in training throughout the course of the day in order to be able to sleep at night, 1,440 minutes a day. So from the minute I'm waking up in the morning, the first thing I do before I lean into my day, and it's especially helpful because I don't have the phone in the bedroom, and this would be helpful for you. First thing I do is I listen to the speed of shit in my brain. I mean, I'm mixing my things here, but I'm listening to the absolute shit storm in my brain. I got to do this. And there's Rav, and there's this, and there's this, and that's that, and there's that. And I got to walk the dog first. But while I fit in my kettlebells training, and then I need this. I've got this financial meeting, and I've got and my daughter's doing it. That's what's going on. I'm not even 30 seconds into my day, and I'm having some kind of minor psychosis, right? So with that in mind, I'm like, okay, one hand over my heart, one on my belly. I'm going to follow 3 exhales. Simple. 3. Just eyes closed. Don't try and change my breathing. Just try and follow my breathing. And then for the 4th one and the 5th, I might then try to lengthen that exhale. So when you make the exhale a bit longer, it takes you into the parasympathetic. And then that's going to set me up. And in that place, I noticed the chimp has gone back into its cage, or it's gone back to bed. It's gone back to sleep. Okay, it's fine. I don't need to worry, but I better make sure I eat breakfast this morning because my blood sugar needs to be steady for what lies ahead of me. My blood sugar needs to be stable, So I better not have that cup of coffee until 3 hours into my day, because if I have that right now, my cortisol levels are going to be even higher. My adrenaline levels are going to spike, So you engage parasympathetic, you make parasympathetic choices as you go through your day. Tell me, Rav, how many politicians and leaders do you think are doing this kind of shit?
0.
Absolutely 0. Why is our world so unsafe? Because the people who are leading are fundamentally unsafe. We're being run by loads of chimps, basically. It's a load of chimps running the world.
Yeah. It's funny. It's similar to this. Joe Rogan has this quote where he said on his podcast before, he's like, I think one qualification for being a major world leader, like president or prime minister or congressman or congresswoman, is to have, I think he said, like 3 ayahuasca experiences or 3 psychedelic experiences, as in people who've actually done the inner work to a certain degree. Then they get into office and see, what are those egotistical motivations for more and more power and ruling over people and mandating certain medications and vaccines and telling people to do this and this, and you can't go here. No, your rights are restricted. Like what's behind that, right?
It's the lower mind. It's the lower mind. It's the reptilian primitive brain. And it makes me sad. And we could joke. I mean, I'm not really joking, and I know you're not really joking, but the knock-on effect, the young generation and mental health crisis, young people who don't feel safe because we're creating a world that doesn't feel safe. So parents and teachers, leaders of corporations and organizations, we need to be over-regulated in our parasympathetic to create safety for our younger generations who are very sensitive as a result of what's been happening in the world for these last few years. My daughter is one of them. Highly sensitive.
Yep. Look, I have a lot of questions and thoughts on this particular topic, both from my own experience, and I'm curious to ask some deeper questions about your practice. So you just said it's important to enter the parasympathetic state more and more. And for people, we should just back up because not everyone knows this, and I didn't know this probably a year ago either. So sympathetic nervous system, that's the kind of agitated, active, anxious part. And then the parasympathetic system, when we enter it, we feel very relaxed and calm. That's the rest and digest. Our digestion is better. Our nervous system is better regulated. So those are the kind of two.
They are. That's a simplification.
Sort of inner realms.
Yeah, it's a simplification of the autonomic nervous system, where you've got these 2 branches, and exactly as you said, sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, survival, adrenaline, cortisol, constantly wanting dopamine hits, wants the caffeine to fuel it, fight or flight. And then you've got the parasympathetic, rest, repair, digestion, the safety part of your nervous system, digestion, sexual function, sleep, restoration. That's your parasympathetic. But if you go deeper into it, we don't necessarily have to, but if you start going into safety science, you look at the hierarchy in terms of evolution of the nervous system. Actually, it was the parasympathetic that came first, a branch of the parasympathetic called the dorsal vagus. The parasympathetic is run by the vagus nerve. The first part of the vagus nerve that came was the dorsal vagus, which is shut down. So shut down, freeze, play dead. So these are when we first evolved, living organisms play dead in the face of threat. And then as we evolved more, we developed the sympathetic nervous system where we could fight or flee, sympathetic. And then as we continue to evolve, you got the ventral vagus. Okay, so you got dorsal vagus, sympathetic nervous system. The other bit, the ventral vagus. Ventral vagus is your safety nervous system, another branch of the parasympathetic. So that's the kind of hierarchy of evolution.
Right. So, for people who are learning about this for the first time, so the ideal scenario is that, like, it's just to be clear, you don't always want to be in the parasympathetic state, right? You want to cycle through sympathetic when you're very aroused, but then be able to go into parasympathetic, right? You want both.
You want to be able to pendulate. So if I were to look at my data now, it will probably show a degree of sympathetic activation. I'm engaged. Hopefully I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed. I mean, I chose my food, my rest, my recovery, my exercise today. Everything was chosen with, what am I going to be doing at the end of the day to keep my nervous system, give it a good chance of being able to regulate. But what we want to be able to do is pendulate back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic and not overly stay in sympathetic, which a lot of people are doing. The sympathetic nervous system is meant to be used in crisis, fight or flight. If I see you as adversarial, highly disruptive, hostile, if I haven't worked on myself and my sense of safety, I could be firing on my sympathetic. My adrenaline could be through the roof right now. If I come onto this thinking with a level of Chimp, low self-worth, self-esteem. Oh, he's done Russell Brand, he's done Joe Rogan, he's done what's his name, Peterson, right? Oh,
Haven't done Joe Rogan yet, but
okay, sorry. Oh, I told my daughter you'd done Joe Rogan.
One day.
She was really impressed. Anyway. Okay.
No, not yet.
Yes, but can you see how the work of feeling safe? We have to meet ourselves. We have to get to know ourselves, and when we don't, that's where it shows up in your sleep. That's where we're going to be running around, with that 1 minute going, I need to know who loves me because I don't really love me. Fundamentally, I don't love me. So I need to know that people out there love me, So-and-so is coming on my show and whatever. Trust me, I have that going on as well. The need for external validation driven by the chimp brain.
Right. Now, this goes to, what you were saying briefly, what you alluded to of like, I guess, I'm obviously not an expert in this. I only have a cursory understanding. But when we say sympathetic nervous system and how we want to be able to pendulate between the two, like sympathetic nervous system, people associate with fight or flight. Now, is that necessarily sympathetic, or is there sort of lower levels of sympathetic that we want to be in? So we don't want to be in fight or flight, but like engaged. Like, is there like a spectrum of sympathetic nervous system, or fight or flight's like when we're really anxious versus more just engaged but still calm? Is that the way to think about it?
Yeah, there's a kind of a spectrum. I'm kind of looking over here. I've got this chart in front of me where you've got I can't. It's actually stuck. Oh, actually no. I can. I've got this chart there that I use in my work where you've got, the spectrum, autonomic nervous system, precision regulation, what to look for, and then you've got the dorsal shutdown, which is lethargic, given up, depressed. I can share this resource with you, and it's a brilliant chart. Lethargic,
Definitely.
shut down. This is where you'll get the oversleepers, apathy, depression. Arousal level in physiology is too low. They just can't be asked, can't get out of bed in the morning. Then you move up into the ventral vagus. We've got calm. And then you've got a little bit more sympathetic going on there. You've got active and alert. And this is the normal bandwidth of life. You want to be going back and forth between that. But you want to be able to move into sympathetic if you need to. So we've got here threat to life, fight or flight, hypofreeze, where again you go back into the shutdown, cannot maintain this level, psychosis, bang, complete collapse. So you've got the clinical extremes.
Where would per se like playing like a competitive game of like table tennis or soccer or basketball? Where would that fall? Theoretically,
you would want to, if you're a competitive athlete, and I've worked with some competitive athletes as well as, I used to do marathons and triathlons and stuff myself, I don't
for
anymore.
People who don't know, Nerina's worked with Premier League soccer players or footballers, which is very impressive.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so Chelsea Football Club. So
very cool.
They want to train themselves with they want to know, they want to show up for their game knowing that they've done all the physical training that they could do. Now you then move into the arena of emotional training and spiritual training and being able to calm that chimp that says, wow, the last time I took a penalty kick for England, I missed it. So here I am, 6 months later, I'm taking a penalty kick again. Is that chimp going to tell me that's going to happen again? Because if so, you're probably going to start moving up. So they will hopefully have worked on that chimp. They will have worked on that trauma. They might have worked with a psychologist or something, done some cognitive work to really be able to work on that inner game, that inner game of tennis or soccer or baseball or whatever. But, a lot of high-performing athletes are perfectionists. I made a film with Amazon Audible. That's why I was gifted the Aura Ring, because I was working with Blake Griffin, the NBA basketball player, who this is in the public arena, but he notoriously had sleep problems. So we made a film.
You worked with him. Yeah.
Well, I worked with Audible, and we made a film. So this was during COVID. So they flew over the camera crew from Audible, and then they patched through. Blake Griffin was on the screen in front of me, and I was sitting in my living room because of COVID, and we were all kind of vaguely socially distanced. And they made a film out of it. So it's out there in the public arena. You can probably Google it and find it. But I was given the Aura Ring because we were comparing my sleep with his sleep. In fact, we didn't in the end because my Aura Ring turned up too late. But he notoriously had sleep problems, and a lot of high achieving performers, whether in the sports world or whether it's actors, actresses. There were times I would walk into that psychiatric clinic. It was a private clinic, so we had a kind of a certain caliber of psychiatric patients. Sometimes I would turn up on the Tuesday for my patient group, and there would be that famous actor who I'd had a crush on as a teenager, who was there as an addiction patient. So how did I get onto that subject? But perfectionism, high achieving human beings, it often comes with this perfection and a chimp that doesn't know how to calm itself down so that it can sleep.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I have a lot of questions and thoughts about this. There's, for people listening or watching, there's a bit of a delay because of Wi-Fi issues potentially on Nerina's side or mine. I have no idea. So apologies, but I was just going to quickly say, it's probably you, but it's all good. I was just going to say briefly, like I was just thinking about this yesterday. I was watching NBA playoffs basketball, which is so much fun this time of year. And I was just watching how a couple of players, one particular player, Karl Anthony Towns on the Minnesota Timberwolves, how before playoffs or at the start of playoffs even, he's very consistently scoring over 20 points, hitting threes, hitting shots over and over again. Since the playoffs have progressed, deeper into the conference finals, his form has just been absolutely horrible, and he just can't get any shots in. Last game, actually, I think he hit 3 threes, which is awesome. But for a long time before last several games, he was not hitting much of anything, and it was just embarrassing and just shocking to see someone so good just not hitting his shots at all. Just keep shooting, and it just doesn't go in. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, does it, in his particular case, I don't know what he's doing or what he's not doing, but like I was having these thoughts of like, maybe there's something going on there deeply psychological that he could work through, maybe like a trauma or just a certain just cognitive pattern that's been playing over and over again. And maybe he had one bad game and then sort of inner criticism and shame and guilt, and that keeps looping over and over again. And maybe he's having sleep issues, or maybe he's having this anxiety about the game. There's this crippling anxiety. Oh my God, what if I miss? What if I miss? What if I miss? And then when you're shooting and you sort of have those thoughts, oh my God, what if I miss? Then, that could potentially make you more likely to miss because you have all those disturbing, intrusive thoughts in your head all the time, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's why you see a lot of athletes like tennis players or, athletics about to do that 100-meter sprint, 400-meter sprint. And the athletes they'll be moving around, they'll be stretching. They have these routines, these rituals that make them feel safe. They probably have a religious cross or something. They'll kiss the cross, and these rituals are all reinforcing, I am safe. These are the things I do before I show up and I'm successful. I do this thing. And, in my own humble way, before I get on stages or before I go on TV, I don't do enough TV for it to be effortless. Radio is easy for me, but I don't do enough TV for it to be effortless. I have done a lot of TV over the last 10 years, but I still get nervous beforehand, especially if it's live. And I have to do a series of things. And one of that it involves, get away from everyone, go to the bathroom, get some quiet time, get out the green room, don't drink coffee, make sure I'm well hydrated, make sure I've eaten properly so my blood sugar is stable. Because if your blood sugar is unstable, you're going to dysregulate quicker.
So just to clarify here, like you've outlined, we don't always want to be in the rest and digest and super relaxed parasympathetic state. We want to pendulate between sympathetic and parasympathetic. But is the ideal scenario that when you're in the sympathetic, you're not at the fight or flight level, unless you're being chased by some creepy man in your neighborhood at 10 p.m. But like as in like when you're in the sympathetic, it's not about being in the fight or flight, but being in sort of in a lower level of being alert. I think you were saying being engaged. And so like, is that the idea?
That's the idea. And it's also the idea is that you then also, you build in recovery. You look at your recovery. So, if you've got a highly stressful event or interview or late interview because of time zones, and it's, that's going to mash up your sleep, how are you going to recover afterwards? Given that you might be going to bed soon after that, how are you going to manage yourself during the day? How are you going to manage yourself after that interview? How are you going to line up your events for the next day? So that you're not then back on an interview first thing in the morning, early in the morning. You might manage your schedule, and then how are you going to manage your self-talk? That might go to bed thinking, the night before a big event, I've got to really get good sleep tonight. A lot of people have, I call it Sunday night syndrome. The night before a big event, or typically the week before the week starts, they can't sleep because that's that inner voice that's going, I got to get good sleep, otherwise I'm going to feel like shit and I'm not going to perform well, or it's the night before a big game. So it's bringing in all these practical things so that you want to get to know yourself well enough to know, yeah, I've got the right amount of adrenaline in my system. So I'm not bored. I'm not standing here on stage bored. I'm not sitting here in front of my interviewee half asleep. I've got the right amount of engagement, but I'm not stressed, and that also comes with experience.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So we've inevitably walked into this part of the conversation, and I wrote down a couple of questions specifically on this. So in your book, so we've said sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system. You've in your book talked about safety energy versus survival energy, which is the same thing, which I found really helpful in the way you delineated that, those two things. And I'd love to dig deeper into that. And we've already touched on it to a degree. And I guess when reading that part, I just was prompted into self-reflection, and something that I've just learned more and more about myself and my nervous system over the past several months is that frequently that I'm in the survival state and I don't know it sometimes. And it's like, it can just be like, there's 10 emails I got to answer, and I got to work out with my trainer in an hour and a half. And then, oh crap, I forgot that phone call. And oh shit, that thing on my to-do list. Oh, and my mom's calling me and I got to help her. It's like, but you don't know it. But then, when you're prompted to a bit of self-reflection, you look inside and you're like, oh, that's actually like real like panic or anxiety or stress, that you just, this contraction like in your chest, or like this kind of like sweating in your palms, and this worry and tension. And you can very quickly get into that, and becoming aware of that is actually very powerful. And like seeing, like I said, when you were talking about survival versus safety energy and how a lot of people are stuck in survival energy at times, I was surprised to see how much I was in that survival state, but didn't know it, because you can get lost in the particulars. Like, oh, it's about this email, like these 10 emails I got to respond to, this podcast I got to do. It's like you're focused on that, but you kind of look on the inside and you're like, oh, there's a lot of contraction and stress. That's like, does that need to be there? Or maybe could I answer those next 5 emails and then go to my gym session, not flying off with all this like panic and stress and, oh my God, what if I'm late? Wow, what if this happens? Maybe can I answer those emails and get on with the day with a level of equanimity and calmness?
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, I think you've summed it up, and I think how wonderful that at the age that you're at, and I can't remember how old you are, but I know you're in your 20s. You're considerably younger than I am.
45.
You're how much? 25, right? 25.
No, I was joking. I said 45. No, 23.
Oh, I missed the 40 because we cut out then. Okay. Yeah, 45. Right. So you've had some, take good self-care. So 25, you're at the age of 25,
23. 23.
23.
Sorry, God, people listening. There's a lag here.
You're going to dysregulate my nervous system now. This delay is so annoying, but it's amazing that at the age of 23, and I think there's more of your generation who are coming on board with a greater self-awareness and a questioning of what is going on in my body. There's much more talk now of trauma, the nervous system, safety, not safety. So it's out there in the public domain, and I think your generation, it's great because you can start to take responsibility. You can become, I call it an arc of transformation, ARC. When we become aware, we can take responsibility, we can make different choices. But
Mm,
in my time, my generation, I mean,
that's really
I
good.
was
I like that. Awareness, responsibility, choices. That's good.
awareness, responsibility, choices. I was 31 before I learned how to cry. I was 31 before I learned the difference between fear
Wow.
and excitement as a result of being sectioned. I thought that what I was feeling was excitement. It wasn't. It was extreme fear. So, and I'm still learning about my nervous system. Still learning.
Right. So we've already talked to a degree about this, but a couple of questions that I had, if you have anything else to add, was like, how can people tell if they're in safety versus survival? I've already explained a bit of that. Is there anything else you want to say on that? And then secondly, how to enter into the what you call the safety energy or the parasympathetic system? How can people enter more into that? I know you suggested for me and for other people, everyone listening to this, that you want to enter the parasympathetics, the safety state throughout the day, not just before bed. So how can we do that more and more, and kind of at what intervals? Because I've like I already said, I'm incorporating that now deliberately before bed. But as I think you were saying, it should be done more throughout the day. So I'm curious what that looks like. So first, how to tell between safety versus survival, to bring that awareness to people, and then number two, how can we enter that, and how often should we enter that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the awareness piece of my ARC, my ARC. So how do I find out if I'm in safety or in survival? And the more you practice it, the better you will get at doing it. So are you aware of your breathing? Are you aware of where your breathing is? Is it up in your chest? Is it up in your throat? Are you aware of your heart rate? Are you aware of a clenched feeling in your chest, contracted feeling in your chest, or solar plexus in your belly? That could be telling you that you're in survival mode. Look at yourself when you're sitting there doing those 5 emails. Are you highly leaned in? Like, I got to do this because I got to go to the gym. I got to do this. Can you lean back? If you're leaned back and you're fully present, and this is one way of getting into the parasympathetic, and I've been doing it while you've been interviewing me, I've been keeping a very strong degree of awareness of my feet on the ground. I have bare feet. My feet are on the ground, on the wooden floor, and I've constantly been feeling my feet on the ground. When I've noticed the tendency to talk too fast and go up into my head, I bring in something kinesthetic or somatic. I use this. It's just a stone, and I tend to rub it, and it brings me back into a felt sensation, back into my body. I might even get my hands and move them up and down my leg.
I've heard that before. Bringing more somatic things, grounding,
feeling
your feet.
Work.
I've heard of techniques like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why when I say to people, first thing in the morning, put your hand on your chest, put your hand on your belly, feel the weight of your hands, breathe into them. It's a somatic experiencing exercise from the work of people like Peter Levine. He's the creator of somatic experiencing therapy. The Havening technique is based on somatic work. So anything that brings you into your body. Now, when I work with people, I know you follow me on Instagram, and last week I put a clip on there where I'm wearing this pink top and I'm talking about feeling safe in myself before I go and work with thousands of people. So I did something beforehand to bring myself into a place of rest. I did a power nap for 10 minutes lying on the floor. I use spiritual affirmations because of my belief system. It's a form of prayer while I'm doing it, which settles my nervous system even more, so that by the time I'm ready to go onto that platform and meet these people, I am safe. So as human beings, we're always mirroring off each other. And if you're off balance, if I'm off balance, you'll be off balance. If you're off balance, I have to work harder to regulate my nervous system. This might sound woo-woo, but actually in science, you can measure this. It's called heart coherence. You get a group of people together, and if their heart rates and their nervous system will synchronize. If you look at things like hostage negotiation in the police, they will tell the negotiator, be very calm. Notice the pitch of your voice, vocal prosody. Use your face in a certain way. Stand in a certain way.
Yeah.
So that the person you're talking to will pick up on those cues and they will start to achieve a state of coherence with you, resonate with your frequency as well. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah, so Lisa Feldman Barrett, by the way, she's a famous neuroscientist. I interviewed her once. She writes about this in her book Emotions, which I was very surprised by and just interesting to hear, which you've reiterated, that we can synchronize our heartbeat. So if you're around a really anxious person, you can get more of that anxiety, or if you're around a really depressed person, your mood levels can also drop because of and that's just so fascinating to think about, and how we think about sort of individuals versus collective groups, and how there's this myth of the skin encapsulated ego, which Alan Watts talked about, is that when we think of ourselves as absolute individuals, sort of isolated silos outside of something, when in reality we're just a totality of genetics and experiences and traumas and people that we're around. So we talked about safety versus survival, and so when I'll say one thing on that first from my experience, which is a lot of people, and this is something I struggled with a lot, and I'm releasing a podcast on this week, by the way, with Dr. David Schechter. There's this whole area of what we call mind-body medicine, people who have particularly chronic pain syndromes, or chronic digestive issues, or tendonitis, or chronic back pain, migraines. And there's this emerging research. There's great books by Alan Gordon called The Way Out, Dr. Howard Schubiner. These people have kind of innovated the space of mind-body medicine, which shows that the vast majority of people struggling with these issues that I mentioned, the cause of their issues is actually fear and anxiety and sort of overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, and their brain kind of sort of fires these pain signals in a various area, whether it's back pain or migraines, or in my case, it was digestion and chest pain. And what I was going to say was that can make it difficult to kind of be in your body. And so for me, there's been sort of an interesting shift over the past several months in, I would say, sort of just growing and improving my meditation practice from before being more mental or sort of spiritually conceptualized to more and more in the body as well. Because a lot of people, they have that fear stored in their body. And for me, for a long time, and I, like I said, people can check out the podcast with Dr. David Schechter that's out this week on mind-body medicine. For me, for a while, entering within my body was so scary. And there was, for a while, I had it accompanies with all these thoughts of maybe I'll have a heart attack, or maybe there's some cardiac problem because I have chronic chest pains, or there's something wrong with my digestion, which there was, but I was so obsessively focused about my digestion that I forgot about safety. And actually coming into safety, this is the kind of a big shift that happened in my life last year, coming into safety and learning to not be afraid of the pain, not being afraid of indigestion, not being afraid of anxiety, and welcoming that through what they call somatic tracking. That can be very powerful. And this kind of it's so, people who are struggling with chronic pain or these kind of physiological symptoms, that they can do more research or check that podcast out. But this relates a little bit to something I was going to say earlier, which is now, and before we go, I want to get some practical tips or takeaways people can implement. But this is something I'm doing more and more before sleeping. So I mentioned now I'm doing yoga nidra before bed, something my Ayurvedic doctor recommended before bed. And I have a couple questions around that. But alongside that, now I'm starting to, as of just a couple days ago, sort of introducing more of a script in my head as well, alongside the yoga nidra, of like, I'm safe, and I can think about these exciting things tomorrow. Now is the time to relax and to sleep and have a deep, restful state. This was introduced a bit in the app where I do the yoga nidras. It's called Waking Up by Sam Harris, which is excellent. And in there too, there's this emphasis on this teacher, Kelly Boys, about having this inner affirmation of like, I'm going to have a deep, restful sleep. I'm going to relax. I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to think about these things. I can think about these problems tomorrow. It doesn't have to happen today. And I think that's really important. And I'm curious if you want to add anything more to this about sort of doing the somatic stuff and being in the body, and also having to introduce certain things to kind of affirm to yourself these things, because we can very quickly end up in that primitive mind. And this, circling back to the chronic pain stuff, that was a big part of my journey, was affirming to myself constantly, which initially sounded just dumb and woo-woo, like why would I do this? But this is something that was recommended, was affirmations of I'm healthy and safe, and doing that over and over, and seeing that, when I say that to myself, I actually don't feel healthy and safe. And so I have to actually tell myself that. And so now when it comes to sleep, using more affirmations as well to kind of to kind of teach my brain, which so quickly falls into just obsessive thinking and planning and sort of exciting rumination about different work projects, of like having to teach that part of like, okay, we can calm down now and we can relax and we can go into bed and have a deep restful state, because that sort of raw energy can be so powerful.
Yeah. So just because we're starting to run out of time and I've got about 5 minutes to go, I mean, I do have a methodology which is encapsulated, if you don't mind me saying, on an online course on my website. And it's very inexpensive.
Yeah, sure.
A cheap methodology, a simple but powerful methodology. But I also, as part of that online course, I have a bonus meditation, which is the Yoga Nidra I use myself. I teach my daughter, who is dealing with a chronic pain problem and has done for 13 years. Migraines,
really?
Extreme migraines. So she's now using this technique after years of me telling her. She's going, Mom, I'm using that thing. But I've taught it to thousands of people, including the Premiership footballers, to use that the night before a big game. I would love to, because it's going to take me a couple of minutes just to describe it. And you can use it when you don't want to go and get your phone. Can I teach you it? It's so simple.
Sure. And one other question too, which is I feel like I know why this is important and you do, but I feel like maybe some people might not be so sure about this, about why we're even talking about safety versus survival, as in why safety is very important for sleep. I feel like you should delineate on that in case people are confused why we're spending so much time on this.
We sleep when we feel safe. The bottom line is we sleep when we feel safe. Human beings have evolved with this nervous system, which is designed along the premise of, am I in survival? Do I need to survive a situation, a threatening situation, or am I safe to sleep? If we didn't have these two bits, we would be extinct as a species. If we were just rolling over and falling asleep when we're surrounded by, saber-toothed tigers, we would be extinct. The problem with our modern day world is that it's constantly sending us false signals that we're not safe. So we end up living in the wrong part of the nervous system. So this technique that I teach, all of my methodology, and in my fourth book, Finding Inner Safety, it's the one that I eventually wrote during COVID. That's the one where I go into this.
I'm excited to read that one day. I'm excited to read that maybe this summer, and then we'll have you on again to talk more. But go ahead.
Okay. So, and it's on Audible. It's on Spotify as well. If you're Spotify Premium, you get it for free. But anyway, but my methodology is all around helping the nervous system to access that state of safety, which is the absolute prerequisite for getting good sleep. So this technique is a version of what you are using in your Yoga Nidra. And I've been teaching it to my clients and patients for over 15 years. So here is how it goes, right? It's going to take us seconds to do this. So you get the person, you imagine that you're in bed at night and you're trying to get to sleep, or you've woken up in the early hours and you're trying to get back to sleep. And you've listened to Dr. Nerina's advice, that voice in your head that says, don't check the time, don't go on my phone, okay? You need to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. But when you come back, put your left hand over your heart, put your right hand on your belly, okay? And there's a reason why there's that sequence. Don't want to talk about that now. Left hand over heart, right hand on belly. Close your eyes, lying on your back or on your side, it doesn't matter. And you're going to go through these words as if you're talking to a baby. You whisper these words silently to yourself. Okay? And these are the words. So you might want to say them to yourself as I am saying them right now, but silently in your mind. Okay, so here we go. This is the Yoga Nidra. I love my left foot. I love my left big toe. I love my left little toe. I love all the toes of my left foot. I love the skin of my left foot. I love the bones of my left foot. I love my left ankle. I love my left calf. I love my left shin. I love my left lower leg. I love my left knee. Okay, if you come back, Ralph, basically I'm working my way up my left leg. The aim is to get to the top of the head and then start going down so you end up on your right foot. You can start on your right foot or you start on your left foot, but you do one or the other. What will happen is it's so damn boring, you're going to start falling asleep. That's the first thing, and you will lose your train of thought. As soon as you lose your train of thought, you go right back to the starting point. I love my left foot. I love my left big toe. And you keep repeating it. So the chimp, you're calming the chimp down by giving it something to focus on, but you're giving it something somatic to focus on, which is the opposite end to the mind, because the chimp is in your brain running around going crazy with obsessive thoughts. You're taking it down into the foot. And the more you use this technique, sometimes I go to bed and I wake up and I go, I am so awake, I'm not going to be able to get back to sleep. I love my left foot. I immediately fall asleep. I wake up, I go, wow, I fell asleep really quickly. I'm going to have to put myself, I love my left foot. And I might do 3 or 4 rounds of I love my left foot. And each time I realize I'm so much more sleepy than I thought, because you go into something called a hypnagogic trance. While I was doing that with you, you probably started to find yourself dropping down a little bit. But you can do this for yourself. You don't need your phone. You don't need plinky plonky music. You don't need the yoga instructor. You don't need the guru. All you need is you. You can make yourself feel safe. And it is so powerful. You can practice it in having an afternoon nap or something. Practice it for 5 minutes.
Sorry,
before you do a podcast interview.
So just to clarify, by the way, so you were saying, so from the left foot and then you go up to your leg, and then do you do your arm? Sorry, are you doing the full body, or is this?
You make it up. You can get creative with it. You know, if you're a biologist, you might want to get into all of the bones and muscles. I love my phrenic nerve. Yeah. You know, I love my maxillofacial muscles. Whatever. You make it up. But I've got the whole thing as a bonus meditation on my website. So if they buy the course, which is something ridiculous, like 30 odd pounds, you know, it's very cheap. Yeah. But if you buy that, you get this as a bonus meditation where you work all the way up. But you learn you don't need me as well. It's so simple that you can do this for yourself.
Yeah.
You can do it tonight.
I've done many variations of this, and if people want something just to like follow, which is what I like, there's the Waking Up app is a great series on safety and sleep, which I just love listening to. And that,
Ralph, can I just say something? Please.
Go ahead.
Ultimate form of safety. The ultimate form of safety, and I'm going to have to go, but it lies within us. We do not need to reach for devices. Yep. We can do it for ourselves. And the use of the word love is deliberate. It is the most safety-inducing word in the English dictionary.
Love.
Yeah?
Right.
You know, it is the most safety-inducing word. I mean, the delays on this podcast, I hope it's going to be okay for your listeners, but I hope that's clear.
It's definitely going to be okay. And yes. So my question was just going to be on this. So obviously I've done various variations of this Waking Up app. Andrew Huberman has some great Yoga Nidra stuff, but just to keep it sort of practical and simple. So just because I'm a little confused. So you were saying left foot, just so people have something practical that they can do without having to think about what to make up and what to do. You were saying left foot and then left leg. And then, what was your exact variation?
I'm not going to give you my exact variation because it's so unbelievably simple. That thousands of millions of people I've worked with have never had a difficulty using it because it's so simple. I love my left leg. I love all my left toes. I love my left foot. Start with your left foot. I love all the toes of my left foot. I love my left ankle. I love my left lower leg. I love my left knee. I love my left thigh. I love my left hip. I love the left side of my groin. I love the left side of my belly. I love the left side of my torso. I love my left arm. I love my left shoulder. Or you can go more detail, and I wouldn't do it as quick as that. You slow down. You can go through each toe, you know, but you want to reassure your brain that it's safe enough to let go, and it keeps letting go of the meditation and falling asleep. And you go, I don't need to worry. You know, I'm actually falling asleep. And what you're doing is you're giving your brain something to think about other than your financial worries or your podcast guest or your teenager or your elderly parent or your relationship falling apart or your social media ratings. You're giving your brain something else to work with, the chimp.
Yeah. But before we go, I'll just say one last thing, which is just that it's just incredible for me, like seeing, like talking to you about this and working on myself, that, ironically, to sleep better, you have to put in this bit of work. You need, Jordan Peterson talks about structure, order and chaos. And it's like, to get to sleep, I realize I need the structure now. I need to do the fucking practice. I need to follow, even when I'm sleepy.
Totally.
I'm finding, even though doing the yoga nidra, even for 10 minutes, I feel like is important now, and doing the self affirmations, if I'm safe and healthy, is needed to get to the sleep. I'm not at this phase anymore, which we talked a little bit about last time. I'm not really the martini sleeper anymore that I used to be, where you just fall asleep whenever you want. Now I have to actually work at it. And I feel like, it's, people can just fall into this idea of, I'm just tired, I should go to bed. If you're struggling with sleep, that is, it's like, you actually need to do a few things and follow a few concrete protocols that we've talked about in order to get to that place, and use those self affirmations, which it just goes to show how, like, that disparity between that higher mind, which you talked about, and that lower mind, and that sort of just chimp brain, which, like, there's certain things that you're struggling with, but, like, for some reason, those obsessive thoughts or anxieties or worries or fears kick in, and then you fall into that smaller brain. And whether that's the deep, depressive side of, like, I can't do anything, or the deep anxiety where you're just constantly worried about something in the future, it's like, when you fall into that, it's very hard to get out of it. And so this is why I think Andrew Huberman is so popular, is like having these concrete protocols, having that structure, so that inevitably when you experience the chaos and the shit hits the fan and things get difficult, those protocols can actually ground you and help you sleep better. So it's like balancing those two of, like, you want to get to better sleep, you got to have that structure, that foundation in the first place, to have that safe, calm, relaxing state of the nervous system, which will help allow you to sleep better. I think that's been one major shift in my thinking about this. It's no longer just getting to bed. It's doing all the stuff before bed, which we've talked about in this conversation.
Yeah, before bed and throughout the day and in your life. I call it the real work. We should be able to sleep naturally, but our world has changed. Our world is chaotic, and we're going too fast. So we've got to do the work on it if we want to be able to rest.
And yeah, I know you have to go, but again, just to clarify on the intervals. So we talked about before bed. You said, like, it should be throughout the day. Is there any kind of cue you want to give to people, or like sort of intervals of, like, 4 or 5 things they can do, or maybe like a meditation and a yoga nidra, something morning and evening, or like, how do you conceptualize, or how do you recommend so people have something easy to follow? Because
yeah. You're going to have to get me back for that conversation, because I've really, really run out of time. Right. I could talk to you forever. Let's do the part 3, and let's come in with, like 10 really specific questions, and we'll narrow down the routine. But it's, at the end of the day, it's about working out what works for you. And the safer we feel, the less routines and structures you need before you go. You need some things, but the more you can blur the lines.
Exactly.
Because I know that all weekend I'm going to be going to bed later than I should, but I know I'm going to sleep really well, because I feel I don't have to work as hard as I used to. And that one day, hopefully, that will happen for you too.
Yes, right. Okay. It's about the safety, not the practice. And to get to that point of safety, so you don't need the practice anymore. So it becomes blurred. That's a really important point for people to understand. But obviously, we'll talk more next time. People need the practices first, because there's so much in the unsafe, anxious state. So you need the structure, so you get into that space more and more.
Absolutely.
Nerina, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to link to your course so people can follow. You also have a newsletter that I'll link below. And a couple of the resources you mentioned, I think maybe that nervous system chart, we'll try to get a link to that. And maybe if I can even access the chart for the different phases of sleep and the different repair processes, that's really interesting. And also I'll leave a link for the Waking Up app, which I use, which is incredibly powerful for guided yoga nidra activities for people who just want to follow something quickly and adopt it into their lifestyle. So Nerina, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rav. And just drop me a line and we'll sort out the next one.
Sure. Yeah. Look forward to having you back on.
Has the dust settled from the COVID policy response? Far from it. The storms are many. Inflation, learning losses, ill health, high crime, broken government services, displaced workers, substance abuse, mass loneliness, discredited science, real estate crisis, censorship, and overweening state power. The world is on fire with war, mass killings, crime, hunger, revolution. The lack of accountability, or even so much as an apology, is a foreshadowing. They'll keep their newfound powers and try it all again. Brownstone Institute is seeking answers, undertaking important research and publishing the results while providing fellowships for dissident scholars who have been professionally displaced. It's not about this one crisis. We urgently need to restore peace, prosperity, and integrity in science and journalism. Visit brownstone.org for more. We may never get to the truth, but we can get closer to the truth. There will be no stopping the efforts.